this episode, we're going to focus on a threat that has become one of the most important realities for online payments: malicious scripts that skim data from payment pages. If you are new to cybersecurity, you might assume the biggest risks happen deep in a data center, like an attacker breaking into a database. But payment page skimming flips that intuition. Instead of stealing data from storage, the attacker steals it at the moment a customer types it, before protections like encryption at rest or tightly controlled databases even matter. That is why protecting payment pages is so central to PCI work, and why the idea of killing script skimmers is really about removing the conditions that let them exist. This is not just a web development issue. It is a control issue, because scripts end up on payment pages through change processes, third-party integrations, analytics, tag managers, customer support widgets, and sometimes through compromised dependencies that nobody directly touched. For a PCI QSA, the challenge is to validate that the organization has a practical way to know what code runs on its payment pages, to prevent unauthorized changes, and to detect suspicious behavior fast enough to limit exposure. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. To understand script skimming, it helps to think about the payment page as a controlled environment where trust must be tightly managed. When a customer types their primary account number, PAN, expiration date, and other payment data, the page is collecting sensitive information in real time. If an attacker can add a malicious script to that page, the attacker can copy those values and send them somewhere else without the customer noticing and often without breaking the payment process. The customer still gets a successful transaction, the merchant still gets paid, and the attacker gets the data. This makes skimmers especially dangerous because they can operate quietly and for long periods. The attacker does not need to break encryption on stored data. They capture the data before it is protected. For beginners, the key mental model is that the browser is an execution engine. Whatever scripts the page includes will run with the page's privileges, and that means the most sensitive moment of the transaction is also the moment most exposed to code that is not under direct human scrutiny. Malicious scripts usually appear through two broad routes: direct compromise and indirect compromise. Direct compromise is when an attacker gains access to the merchant's environment, such as a web server or a content management system, and edits the payment page or its resources. Indirect compromise is when an attacker compromises something the merchant trusts, like a third-party script provider, an update source, or a dependency that the merchant includes on the page. Indirect compromise is especially tricky because the merchant may not change anything themselves. They are simply loading a script from somewhere they have always used, and that script becomes malicious upstream. This is where beginners sometimes feel helpless, as if third-party code makes security impossible. The reality is that you can manage this risk by controlling what third-party code is allowed, by limiting where code can be loaded from, by monitoring for changes, and by treating payment pages as high-sensitivity assets with special governance. A QSA looks for evidence that the organization has recognized these routes and built controls that reduce both routes' likelihood and impact. A smart way to protect payment pages begins with inventory and visibility, meaning the organization can list what scripts are present and why they are present. On many websites, scripts accumulate over time. A marketing pixel is added, then a customer chat widget, then an analytics tracker, then a performance monitoring library, and soon there are dozens of scripts, some loaded directly and some loaded by other scripts. The payment page can become the most script-heavy page because it is where business teams want insight into conversions and drop-offs. That business desire is understandable, but it can create a security disaster if scripts are added without tight review. The QSA validation mindset asks for the story behind each script: who owns it, what purpose it serves, where it is loaded from, and whether it is approved for the payment page. If the organization cannot answer those questions, then it cannot credibly claim it controls what executes at the moment the customer enters payment data. Visibility is the first requirement for killing skimmers, because you cannot remove what you cannot see. Once visibility exists, the next layer is change control discipline specific to payment pages. Payment pages should be treated as a high-risk change zone. That does not mean no changes are allowed. It means changes are reviewed with heightened scrutiny. A small change like adding a new script or updating a library can introduce an entirely new data exfiltration path. Good discipline includes reviewing the business need, reviewing the security impact, testing changes before they go live, and documenting approvals. It also includes preventing quick emergency changes from becoming permanent exceptions, because emergency changes are a common source of untracked script additions. For beginners, it helps to see that payment page security is a governance problem. The code is the obvious surface, but the root causes often involve people, approvals, and how the organization balances speed with risk. A QSA will look for evidence that changes to payment pages are handled through a controlled process, and that this process is actually followed, especially when third parties request changes or when marketing teams want to add tracking. Another major protection is limiting where scripts can come from, which is about controlling trust boundaries. If a payment page can load scripts from anywhere, then any compromise in any included domain can become a compromise of the payment page. If the payment page is restricted to loading scripts only from a defined set of sources, the attack surface narrows. For a beginner, you can think of this as a guest list. Only the approved guests can enter, and everyone else is turned away. Even without discussing technical mechanisms, the principle is stable. Reduce the number of external sources your payment page depends on, and reduce the number of scripts that execute in the sensitive context. Many skimming incidents become possible because a merchant includes broad third-party scripts that have the ability to dynamically load additional scripts. That is a chain of trust that can extend far beyond what the merchant believes they included. A QSA assesses whether the organization understands and constrains that chain. If the chain is uncontrolled, the payment page is effectively open to remote code changes through third-party dependencies. Monitoring and detection are also essential because prevention controls can fail, and you need a way to notice unusual behavior quickly. For payment pages, detection means being able to identify when scripts change, when new scripts appear, or when existing scripts behave differently. This is similar to the idea of file integrity monitoring, but applied to web assets and executed code. The goal is to catch drift, which in this context includes unexpected changes to page content, unexpected additions of scripts, or unexpected calls to external destinations that could indicate exfiltration. Beginners should notice the difference between detecting a breach and detecting conditions of a breach. Conditions include changes in page content, changes in script inventory, and changes in outbound connections. If you detect conditions early, you can stop the attack before it results in large-scale data theft. A QSA will look for evidence that the organization has monitoring around payment pages and that monitoring results are reviewed and acted upon. If monitoring exists but nobody checks it, the control is fragile. A common misconception is that if the payment page uses a third-party hosted payment field, the merchant no longer needs to worry about script skimmers. Third-party payment solutions can reduce the merchant's exposure to the primary account number, but they do not eliminate the risk of malicious scripts affecting the payment flow. A skimmer can still attempt to capture data entered elsewhere, can still manipulate what the customer sees, and can still impact trust and user behavior. Even if sensitive data is intended to be handled by a third party, the merchant's page can still become a vehicle for fraud, brand damage, and misleading transactions. The right mindset is to understand exactly what the merchant page controls and executes, and to protect that environment as a sensitive surface regardless of where payment processing ultimately happens. A QSA will push for clarity on what data is present, where it is handled, and what scripts execute in proximity to that data. Hidden assumptions are where skimmers thrive. Another hidden risk is the natural tendency for organizations to prioritize business analytics and rapid experimentation on checkout pages, because checkout is where revenue is won or lost. Teams run experiments, adjust layouts, add new tracking, and integrate new offers. Each of these changes can be legitimate and valuable, but they can also expand the number of parties and scripts that have access to the checkout context. When the organization's culture treats checkout as a marketing playground rather than a sensitive environment, security controls get pressured into being flexible. That flexibility is what attackers exploit. Killing skimmers, in the long term, means aligning the organization's culture so that checkout and payment pages are treated as controlled spaces with guardrails. Guardrails can include stricter approvals, tighter script governance, limited third-party access, and clear ownership of what is allowed. A QSA will often evaluate whether ownership exists and whether security has a seat at the table when changes are made. If ownership is unclear, the payment page becomes a shared surface where many teams can introduce risk without accountability. As we bring this to a close, remember that malicious script skimmers are powerful because they attack the moment of data entry, not the storage layer. Protecting payment pages requires visibility into what scripts execute, disciplined change control for any modifications, strong control over third-party dependencies, and monitoring that detects unexpected changes and suspicious behavior. The phrase "kill skimmers" is really about killing the opportunities that allow skimmers to be introduced and to persist unnoticed. A PCI QSA will validate that the organization can explain its payment page script ecosystem, can control how scripts are added and updated, and can detect drift quickly enough to respond. If you keep the mental model of the browser as an execution environment and the payment page as a high-sensitivity zone, the strategy becomes clear. Reduce the number of scripts, reduce the number of trusted sources, tighten approvals, and watch for change. When these disciplines are in place, skimmers lose the cover they rely on, and payment pages become a safer place for customers to enter their payment data.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.